welcome to my video. My name is Taria, and I know it's been a long time since I've uploaded. I will spare you the details. It happens to every YouTuber, I guess. And today's video is going to be about, if you liked this book, then you should check out this book. I don't really feel like I've ever read enough books to give you like a really big recommendations video, or even like multiple a year like some YouTubers do. But I was looking through my Goodreads and kind of seeing the little similarities here and there and who I'd recommend these books to. So I have 8 sets of recommendations, and yeah, I guess we're just gonna get into it. So the first one is, if you liked The Dating Plan by Sarah Desai, I think is her name, I think that you would like Dating Dr. Dill. I gave The Dating Plan, I think, 3 stars. And then I gave Dating Dr. Dill, I think, 4 stars. But these books have something that I didn't know I loved it until I read it for the first time. And that is Asian Aunties, which is like one of my new favorite things in books, because they're so interesting, so funny, and are their own character and plot point in the story. And both of these books do that so well. They're hilarious. I'm definitely going to be looking for more books that have Asian aunties, so if y'all want to leave me some recommendations, if it has to do with Asian aunties, just let a hoe know. But The Dating Plan and Dating Dr. Dill are both enemies to lovers, except The Dating Plan has like brother's best friend trope interwoven in it. But I personally think Dating Dr. Dill was just a little bit better. It was a little bit funnier. It was spicier. I mean, both of these books are spicy, but Dating Dr. Dill was like, woo! And she has another book coming out soon. I think it's like in the series, and I'm so excited. But I would recommend these books to the same people. And if you haven't read any books with a lot of like deep cultural aspects in like your contemporary romance, girl, what are you doing? So I read a lot of different genres, right? And this video is gonna be all over the place in terms of genres, but one genre that I really like is mythology retellings, and I had read 2 or 3 going into this next book that I'm gonna recommend, and that is Ariadne and Circe. And these are both Greek mythology retellings of women who have been perceived to be these villainous women, but really it's the perception of them that society's had, that I guess the mythology itself has had. But these authors have gone through and they've said, wait a minute, like, I don't really see how these women would have been the villains here. And they've given them a lot of heart, a lot of depth, and a lot of background, and just have wrote these really awesome stories, Circe being my favorite book ever. So I went into this next one hoping that I would have a lot of that same stuff, and it did. And that's Kaikeyi. And Kaikeyi is a Indian mythology retelling. So I didn't know if I was going to be able to kind of dive into Indian mythology. First of all, I didn't know much about Greek mythology to begin with, but I was at least familiar with names and a few stories here and there. Well, Indian mythology, I didn't know any of these words at all. But this was a book that does also take a woman who's been perceived as villainous in that mythology, and Kaikeyi is a strong woman from start to finish. It's not like she was this very passive thing. No, she was always very, I don't want to say she was assertive. I mean, she has a lot of softness to her, but she's also been fierce the entire time. So if you want to read a book that has a fierce female character from the get-go, I would recommend Kaikeyi. And this book it did what it needed to do so well that it actually had me really angry for like days after, because just the misogyny being so well played out. Next, if you liked Verity by Colleen Hoover, I think that you would enjoy The Hunting Wives by May Cobb, I want to say her name is. These have that similar voice, and actually I could probably do an entire recommendations video based off of this voice, this narrative style that are given to female characters in thriller books, where it's like, hey, I'm a woman, but I'm really not that soft type of woman. I'm not very traditional, not like other girls, but it's this voice that it's like overly sterile, lacking emotion. These are similar in the sense of there is one main character who is meant to be a lot more relatable, who is sort of in this shadow of another female character who is more successful, who is known to be beautiful, who is known to be smart, who's kind of like the center of attention kind of woman. And these other two women in these books respectively have to kind of come in, and they're figuring out, okay, wait a minute, what's going on with this? And so Verity is about this girl who starts to be a ghostwriter for a woman named Verity. In terms of her health, cannot write her next book, and so our main character has to be the one to write the next book. And then in The Hunting Wives, we have a woman who's new in town who meets these other wives, including one of these women named, I forgot what her name was, but she meets her and she kind of is really drawn to her. We also have two main female narrators who are kind of on that unreliable track. A kind of trigger warning for The Hunting Wives, because there's some pseudo like pedo stuff that you don't know if it is or if it isn't at the time. So kind of trigger warning for that there, because it definitely makes you feel icky, but it is purposefully to make you feel icky. Does that make sense? Like, it's not like the author is excusing it or anything like that. I've got some horror recommendations. The Winter People and Stolen Tongues. These are similar in the sense of they both take place around the same time of year, in the winter, and there's something creepy and otherworldly going on, of course, because it's a horror book. And there is also ties in both of these books to Native American, like, kind of beliefs or myths. I will say that although I do have a little bit of Native American in my background, that I don't actually know anything about it, and that if Indigenous people are telling you that something in these books is wrong, to definitely listen to them. I certainly yield any of my recommendations to what they would recommend. And The Winter People is a lot like Pet Sematary by Stephen King. So there's like a cemetery, and it has this dual timeline, missing people. Stolen Tongues has to deal with this guy. They go to, I guess, his girlfriend's parents' vacation home, like on a snowy mountain, and then all this creepy stuff starts to happen. And this book, probably over any other book that I've ever read, has actually made me scared. Like, it's given me goosebumps, it's given me nightmares, that type of thing. On a different note, I have two historical fictions. Historical fiction is like one of my favorite genres, but I haven't read a lot from it lately. But one book that I have read this year was The Vanishing Half, and I feel the same people who like The Vanishing Half would love The Nightingale, and vice versa, obviously. The Nightingale has to deal with two sisters who respond to Nazis taking over France during World War II in these very different ways, and following their experiences that are so heart-wrenching. And Kristen Hanna just does such a great job with historical fiction and the details that she provides, and really like hitting you in your fucking gut. But at the same time, The Vanishing Half does something similar, but it follows more generations of people. So The Vanishing Half is about two sisters who are twins. They're both white passing, and they live in this small town in Louisiana. And one of them, as she grows up, kind of lives her life as a mixed race woman, and the other tries to hide that identity and survive as a white passing woman, and rejecting any part of her that is black, kind of being a racist herself. We get to see just different generations. This story is so beautiful, and it has the added complexity of being about race, and whenever that's in a story, it does draw your mind toward modern things, because racial issues haven't just gone away. Back to thrillers, I have two that don't really seem very similar on the outside, but I'll explain. The first is The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides, and I think if you liked that book, that you would enjoy Insomnia by Sarah Pinborough. This one came out earlier this year, and I kind of heard a few people talk about it, but not as many as what I find acceptable for this book, because I think it's amazing and that more people should be talking about it. But what these two books have in common is that you get to the end of the book, you get to those final twists, and you go, wait a minute, what? I have to reread this book entirely from the beginning, because how could I have missed something like that? And I love that about a book, when you feel like, wait a minute, I just spent 350 pages reading you, and how did I not pick up on this very blatant thing that was right in my face the entire time? Or that thing just flipped the script. I really want to go back to the beginning and give this book another shot. And I can't say the type of thing that I'm talking about, because it would spoil both of these books. But if you read one, I really do think that you'll like the other. Insomnia is a lot creepier. Definitely made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Like that opening, I think it was the prologue, or the opening few chapters with like the repeating of the numbers. It gets me. I have goosebumps right now. Two more historical fictions, but going back a little bit more, I have The Lost Apothecary, and if you liked that book, I think that you would enjoy The Parlor Game. So The Parlor Game is one that I read on NetGalley. I had it as an ARC, and I found that these two books have a lot of the same vibes. I mean, I picked up The Parlor Game thinking that it was going to be more of what I thought The Lost Apothecary would be, like with a lot of this magic-y type of vibes, and it wasn't, but it was a pleasant surprise, even though it was different than what I expected of it. So The Parlor Game is about this young woman who has lost her mom, and she meets this mysterious woman at her mom's funeral who's like, yo, you should like come to my town in London. And she's like, oh, word, for real? And so she goes there, but then a mystery unwinds as she gets to London. Is it London? She goes to another city in England somewhere, and once she gets there, a whole other mystery arrives, and there's these there's also a little bit of talks of botany, I guess, like the study of plants and stuff, and a big theme that is in this book is like womanhood and sisterhood, and just kind of being there for each other, especially at a time period where it wasn't necessarily okay. This also has to do a little bit with like paranormal type stuff, like you know, the people back in the day where they used to like sit around and have a seance and stuff. It has to do with some of that. But The Lost Apothecary is about a woman who finds out about this old ass apothecary in like, I don't know, the 1600s, 1700s, a long ass time ago. And she wants to uncover it. She wants to figure out what ended up happening that this apothecary is lost. And that one has to do a lot with womanhood and sisterhood as well, but it's a lot more generational because of the dual timelines being so far apart. Lastly, to end off on a nice and bright, happy note, I have Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez that came out earlier this year and it got really popular. And if you liked that, I would say Second First Impressions by Sally Thorne. Let me explain. Part of Your World is about two people who, one of them is a doctor. She comes from a very prestigious, like, doctoral background with her family and all of that. And the other one, he is a small town, simple guy. And of course, they end up falling in love because it's a contemporary romance. Second First Impressions is about a young woman who works at this kind of elderly community where she's become kind of a hermit. She ends up meeting this new guy who has like a motorcycle and long hair and different things. The reason that I compare these two is because they both are dealing with main characters who come from very different worlds. It's the same thing with Second First Impressions. Once you find out more about the male main character, he is coming from a lot of a more different world and a complex family background, and so is the main female character in Part of Your World. I feel like if you want a book that has that, where the characters really seemingly from the outside shouldn't be together, they kind of are opposites. There's a little bit of like family dynamics and stuff, but it still is a book that has a lot of its lighthearted moments. I think that you would enjoy this. Another thing that makes me compare these two in my mind is that the focus on some of the side characters and the side characters' growth. There's the adorable old ladies in Second First Impressions that I think about all the time, and I just love them. They're adorable. But in Part of Your World, there's a character who suffers from PTSD, and there's also a character who is unfortunately suffering from a domestic violence situation, but it's like a side character. But it does end up getting interwoven into the other couple's stories, and it just offers a lot of extra heart and emotion to these books that I still feel like they otherwise would have. But yeah, I think about them a lot, like, similarly. I think I gave both of these like 4 stars. That's the end of my video. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know, what are your recommendations? Do you agree with my recommendations? And all that good stuff. If you want to stick around, I do have other videos on this channel. I'll link them here, maybe here. I'll link them somewhere. But yeah, you can subscribe if you want to. You can comment anything you want. But other than that, have a great day. Bye.